Chapter 9. A Note on Time and Consciousness. A model that has infinite recursion could be discussed infinitely. Being that the model started from nothing, it is well to end here on cavities which are likewise nothing. And this very statement of beginning and ending brings up time. Thus far, this entire book has been described in sequential linear time, which, in reality, does not exist. Time can only exist in relation to something else. It is a sequence of space-time events traversed at a certain rate. Therefore, it is motion compared to motion, and the product of only being able to perceive a limited portion of infinity. Thus, time is the result of human limitations, and is not really a thing in itself. Furthermore, there is more than one sequence of time. For a sequence to exist, it has to be perceived. It is the perceiver that has the possibility to exist in a hypertime. For not only is there a rate of sequence, but there is also a rate of perception of that sequence. The way to prove this is with the Mobius, wherein space-time twists and repeats itself. Here the normal fourth-dimensional time is skipping, yet the perceiver's sequence of perception of the Mobius is constant. For if it were in sync with the skipping fourth-dimensional time, the perceiver would be incapable of perceiving the skip. Thus, the perceiver is operating on an independent sequence, which the author considers to be a fifth-dimensional time, or hypertime, the sequence of conscious perception. Hypertime is then the rate of perception of sequence, while normal time is the rate of the sequence itself compared to another rate of sequence. Rate is only relative to another rate, for with only one rate, there is only sequence. For example, the incredibly fast movements of very small insects, such as a fly. A human rises to strike a fly. The fly appears to move lightning fast out of the way of the descending hand, and as soon as the hand slaps the table, a tea kettle whistles. The fly's total lifespan is only about a week long. Imagine then that the fly has the same amount of perceivable space-time events as the human does, compacted into that small lifespan. Thus, its rate of perception is countless times higher. To the fly, the human rising up from the chair may take a year of its life. The descending of the hand may take another year. The fly then mustering up the power to leap into the air and take off may take a month, etc. However, as soon as it escapes the hand that causes a titanic explosion, a tea kettle whistles, which may last a decade. Thus, both relative rates of sequences were the same, in proportion to the other sequences, such as the hand and the whistle. However, the rate of perception of the sequence was different. Hypertime can therefore be broken down into a wave applicable to the ideal field model, as the pulsation of the intensity of the consciousness into static time-space fabric, all possible events. The degree of focus being amplitude, the strength of desire being frequency, and the wavelength being the gap between successive space-time events. The center of the model would be the ego sending and receiving this wave. For example, when skiing down a hill, the ego assesses the environment. This is the initial prime mover. The energy density of perception is strongest at the ego itself, and then thins out further away from the self. For a tree a mile away is not as important as the one right in front of the skier. The ego then compares all of the data to where it just was, and thus perceives motion and forces. This is the return of the prime mover's force to the center, the potential void. From here, it makes a decision, which subsequently alters the next set of space-time events, such as go left or right. This then repeats the entire cycle. Thus, the seed which gives impetus to the prime mover is the wave itself, which subsequently biases the pattern of possible space-time events to a certain set directly related to the nature of the seed wave, which is thought. Each time the wave returns to the center, infinite potential, it has the ability to change, which is decision. Decision alters the parameter of the wave to favor symmetry, simplicity, and stability of accumulated energy density, just as dictated in the ideal field model. Energy density in this case is knowledge gained from experience of space-time events. Thus, the consciousness grows according to the ideal field model. The above cycle basically constitutes thought. Thought is thus a waveform, and to communicate it to another, it must take the form of symbols. And sometimes those symbols have a corresponding sound, which is also a waveform. These special symbols are called language. In discussing symbols of thought and how they relate to the ideal field model, we come to the work of Dan Winter. In short, Mr. Winter shows that a spiral, when lifted off of the torus and cut in half, casts shadows that generate all of the ancient Hebrew letters, and many of the letters of other sacred alphabets as well. While when uncut, it generates the Greek letters. It is interesting to note that the ideal field model is a torus, and that the Hebrew Holy Book is the Torah, meaning the law. Being that all things obey the ideal field model, it could be said that it is a law, if not the law. To visualize this, refer to the toroid model, page 3, and note the spirals thereon. Looking at the model, note only one spiral. To do this, pick a colored band and imagine that you could peel it off of the torus. The shape that appears when cut in half would be the form in image 56. This asymmetrical form, when seen from different perspectives, generates the letters. This tiny section on Mr. Winter doesn't even scratch the surface of his work. For those who are intrigued by this, it is highly recommended that they pursue the study of Dan Winter's material at his goldenmean.info website. See the link on the screen. Amongst the countless differences of this, it is presented primarily to show that ancient mankind knew of this form, and possibly even the higher math associated with it. It is further speculated that they may even have been aware of electromagnetism and plasma. Anthony Peratt at thunderbolts.info has collected the images on the left from around the globe and compared them to modern-day plasma formations created within laboratories. Note the toroidal center and dual vortex. It is not insinuated that primitive man was producing plasma, but observing it in the ancient sky as a byproduct of the cosmic electrical equilibrium of our early solar system. It can reasonably be concluded that our species in the past at least knew of plasma, the forefront of our modern science, whether or not they understood it. Ancient man has long placed supernatural qualities on certain symbols. In light of what has been presented, their claims are not wholly unfounded. The above shows that many of the 2D symbols are representations of 3D waveforms. As this document has discussed, all things are three-dimensional waveforms following the dynamics of the ideal field to more or less degrees of perfection. It is the imperfections that lead to the characteristics of matter that we are familiar with. Precise application of waveforms to achieve desired effects may indeed seem supernatural to a primitive culture, as the power of language and writing must have been to early humans. It is known that a wave's shape alters another wave's shape constructively or destructively. Imagine then that there was an ideal field, which is also a wave, for it is propagating energy. Anything within the field would be affected by it, thus generating a specific wave contrary to the field's wave geometry at any certain point would negate the effects of the field at that point. Each area in a spiraling vortex would require a different cancellation geometry due to the complex vectors at each radii from the system's center. The amoeba device of Akashima Laboratories, to the left, uses 50 wave generators to draw pictures and text in a pool of water by their net destructive-constructive interference. This shows that if a field of a certain vibration pattern can create a shape, then a shape can cause a field of a certain vibration pattern. This may be the reason behind reports of strange writing reported to cover the hulls of many sighted UFOs. For a charged hull would create a uniformed field, but specific etchings in the hull would subsequently alter the field. For according to the ideal field model, to ascend and descend in a field, an object merely has to lose or gain energy density respectively. However, to navigate precisely may require more complex field manipulations. And with that otherworldly application for the ideal field model, this document comes to an end. The author hopes that this has sparked significant curiosity within readers to pursue the study of this model in greater detail, apply it to their works, and to ultimately expand upon it. With time, building an enlightened society of expanded consciousness with all schools of thought more easily comprehended by all being based on one model. End. TheOneSong. Presentation of the Ideal Field Model by B.K. Bodish.